welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Welcome to part 2 of my review of Masks of Nyarlathotep for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition by Chaosium. In this video I will be covering the prologue chapter, Peru. The events of this chapter take place in March 1921, almost 4 years before Jackson Elias summons his friends to show his findings in the original 4 versions of Masks. It's important to note that this entire chapter can be skipped if the keeper prefers. However, the aim of the chapter is to flesh out the character of Jackson and provide a reason for him being considered a good friend to the investigators. The chapter begins with the story of Augustus Larkin, the eldest son of a wealthy colonial family in Kenya who refused to follow in his father's footsteps and instead became a drunken womanizer. The less reputable aspects of Nairobi society brought him to the attention of Mweru, whom he had a brief fling with, and ended up involving him with the cult of the Bloody Tongue. Larkin attempted to escape, but the cult and Mweru had other plans. He was drugged and then she placed a mysterious tattoo on his chest, a stylised version of the symbol of the Bloody Tongue, with the ink containing mystical ingredients that would tie him to the crawling chaos, allowing Nyarlathotep to control his actions and on occasion possess him. The poisons in the ink are slowly killing him, with his flesh rotting from the inside and his blood turning to black tar. He has spent the last few years travelling the world acting as a messenger in Dog's body, with his latest mission being to visit Peru in order to free an avatar of Nyarlathotep called El Padre de los Gusanos, the father of maggots, that has been imprisoned for around 3,000 years in an ancient pyramid in the Andean highlands near to the Bolivian border. It was built by an unknown contingent of the Tiwanaku people, and there are no records of its existence, and the area is shunned by local farmers due to its evil reputation. In the 1540s, a group of conquistadors happened upon the pyramid and found entrance to it, which had walls inlaid with strange designs in gold. They removed some of the inlay and weakened the magical ward holding the father of maggots inside. The inner walls cracked, allowing it to release part of its essence into the world as small, writhing flesh seeds, and a few of these entered the bodies of the conquistadors, transforming them into hunger-driven, mindless servants. One of them managed to escape unscathed, one Gaspar Figueroa. His account survives in the archive in Lima, which the players can find later on. The conquistadors had become deathless tools of Nyarlathotep, travelling the remote regions of Peru and Bolivia and preying on lone travellers. They sucked the life out of their victims as fat and body fluid, leaving a shriveled husk behind. They then journey back to the pyramid and vomit this into a crack at the top to sustain the father of maggots. This has been happening for around 350 years. In 1920, Larkin went to the pyramid in an attempt to release the avatar contained within, but the surviving wards repelled him. Nyarlathotep, through Larkin, restored the intelligence of the conquistadors, or as folklore had named them, Karisiri, meaning to cut with a knife, and instructed them to destroy the wards, something they couldn't do. Larkin's next option was to try to convince locals of the riches that could be plundered, but combined with the fact that he had been seen with suspected Karisiri and the evil reputation of the place, he was unsuccessful. He had another idea. He would recruit foreigners under the pretence of an archaeological dig hinting at treasure within, so that they would enter the place and remove the wards. He headed back to Lima and wrote to a number of academic institutions, being interviewed by various news agencies and drumming up people for his expedition. While in Lima, he is accompanied by Luis de Mendoza, one of the original conquistadors, who is a Karisiri and his bodyguard. This is where Jackson Elias comes into play. While conducting research for his new book, he came upon the Karisiri legend, and having experience researching death cults worldwide, he assumed it was similar in Peru, wondering if it was something that the conquistadors had brought to the Americas due to them being portrayed as white men, and so with a new sense of purpose headed off there. The hope of the campaign is that through Larkin, the investigators will meet Elias and befriend him, leading to how the original incarnation of Masks began. It then goes on to discuss how the Peru chapter connects to the bigger picture, pointing out the similarity of Larkin's chest tattoo to the cult of the Bloody Tongue, the two different Masks of Nyarlathotep that they encounter, those being one possessing Larkin and the father of maggots. And it goes on to discuss how Peru connects to Elias through his research into the Karisiri and the fact that in the 4 months he spent in Peru talking to the locals and finding out about de Mendoza and the suspicions that they had that he was one of them. Elias followed de Mendoza from a distance, learning of his association with Larkin and his plan to find and explore the pyramid. Elias believes it and the surrounding site are linked to the Karisiri. Using a pseudonym, Elias volunteered to join Larkin's expedition, with neither him nor Mendoza aware that he has been investigating them. De Mendoza has learned, however, that an African man with an American accent has been asking questions and is already suspicious. When the investigators arrive in Peru to join the expedition, they will meet Jackson Elias, who is keen to find allies to help him with his researches. The prologue chapter begins with the investigators having been recruited by Larkin via the press or a similar means. The expedition consists of Augustus Larkin, Luis de Mendoza, Elias's pseudonym Jesse Hughes, and the investigators. It points out the importance of introducing Elias to the investigators and them taking a shine to him, and the fact that many of the encounters in Peru are designed to appear more dangerous than they actually are. For example, the Cariciri are dangerous, but their tactics are poor, and even though Larkin hosts a portion of the crawling chaos, he is weak in both mind and body. It also points out the importance of keeping Jackson Elias alive, as he is essential in the New York chapter, and stresses that he should at no point outshine the investigators, but should play a steadfast supporting role that is in no way a coward. He is also incredibly lucky, which should come into play if required. It then goes on to discuss the pulp considerations for this chapter, which cranks up the difficulty somewhat. After this, it talks about the setting of Peru, giving us some facts and figures on the landmass, population, history and culture, along with a map of both Peru and Lima, and then it moves on to the kinds of things investigators would concern themselves with, such as money, the weather and accommodation. In 1921, hotels are largely basic, and it points out that Larkin and de Mendoza are staying at the Hotel España, and that the investigators and Elias are being put up at the Hotel Maori, which is around 10 minutes walk. If questioned as to why they are staying in a different hotel, Larkin will tell them that the Hotel España is fully booked. This is a lie in order to place some distance between himself and the expedition, so that they can't learn about his physical frailty, drug addiction, or spend time with de Mendoza. It then moves on to information about the Cariciri. They are a loosely organised cult centred around the father of maggots. Each Cariciri carries one of its larvae in their stomachs, which they need to vomit into the mouth of a victim in order to convert them. There are more than 30 currently active and are of many ethnicities, man, woman or child. They collect valuables like magpies from their victims. As the number of Cariciri has grown, so has the power of the father of maggots. However, the remaining wards still hold him in place. Following this, we have a section on Dramatis personae. Here it details the various allies, independents and adversaries that the Peru chapter contains. It gives a bit about their history, a description, their traits and role-playing hooks. First up is Jackson Elias, and it includes a section on making him likeable. Following this, we have Petronila Cupertina, the lady who owns the Hotel España, and she is followed by Professor Nemesio Sanchez and Trinidad Rizzo, both of whom are from the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. More on those later. They're followed by Naira, a wise woman and healer that they encounter on Lake Titicaca, and this is followed by Augustus Larkin, although the small picture and picture of him sleeping and exposing his tattoo look like completely different people. It gives some hints and tips on how to play Larkin as Nyarlathotep when he becomes angry. His eyes turn completely black and his whole demeanour changes from one of physical weakness to an imperious, commanding, even mocking one. Unlike other forms of Nyarlathotep, this one does not release a monstrous form when destroyed. It also mentions that the players can spot his tattoo as well as his blackened veins, which he attempts to hide. Also included are the 402-year-old de Mendoza, and it discusses his appearance and the general appearance of the Cariciri. It also includes the minor NPCs of Julio and Domingo Cespedes, who they encounter later on. The scenario proper starts in the Bar Cordano in Lima, with Larkin arranging to meet the prospective members of his expedition there. The players arrive and are shown to Larkin's table with De Cordoza and Elias seated. After pleasantries are swapped, he introduces de Mendoza as his personal aide and Elias as a folklorist from New York City. Over dinner he discusses heading into the highlands, locating the site and recovering the artefacts from it. The players get the air that Larkin expects everyone to become wealthy, or at least a measure of success within their specific fields. He will answer a variety of questions with regards to the Lost Pyramid, though those with psychology skills may be able to detect that he isn't telling the whole story, although he can produce 2 items he supposedly bought from a farmer, a pendant of a man holding 2 rods or staves embellished with rectangular shapes, and a golden cup with carved geometric patterns inlaid with turquoise. Those with archaeology skills will determine that they are from 2 different time periods and cultures and resemble those taken from the Tiwanaku. After the meal, Larkin leaves and Elias asks the investigators to stay and have a drink with him in order to get to know each other better. He will then, when the coast is clear, ask the investigators how much of what Larkin has said they believe in, and if they show any doubts, reveal his real name and that he believes that Larkin is leading them to danger. He tells them about his research and about the death cult. He also tells them everything he knows, including the fact that Professor Nemesio Sanchez was ignored by Larkin and that he has some old documents and artefacts related to the site. It also advises that some people in Puno, a small city near to where they are going, warned him that de Mendoza is a Cariciri, stressing that he doesn't believe in monsters, though he suspects that he and Larkin are involved in the cult he is researching. If the players are friendly, he offers to introduce them to Professor Sanchez. There's an alternate way for the players to meet Sanchez outside of the university, though the scenario implies steering the investigators away from there so that the full university scene can play out. It gives us details on the Hotel España and the differences between the way that de Mendoza and Larkin's rooms are kept. And then it moves on to the Museo de Arqueologia y Antropologia, or Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, where Elias has arranged a meeting with Professor Sanchez, should the narrative have travelled in that direction. When they arrive, Sanchez explains that he offered to help Larkin but was ignored and rebuffed, and as such he suspects that Larkin is going to steal his country's ancient treasures. To this end, he believes he needs to get there before Larkin, and has one of his students, Trinidad Rizzo, going through the university archives as they seek to find any information on the pyramid, admitting that they have found a document from the mid-16th century that may refer to the site. As time passes, it will dawn on everyone that Rizzo has not shown up, and should they offer, Sanchez tells them where they can find her, though he suspects she's just found something interesting. When the players arrive in the storeroom, they find it dimly lit and silent. If they arrive too late, they find Rizzo half buried under a pile of artefacts murdered by de Mendoza, who has been conducting his own investigation and discovered the possibility of a rival expedition. He plans to infect Sanchez and use him to provide this information to Elias. Rizzo's body looks mummified with a large disc of flesh torn on her upper chest. In her possession she has the notes of Gaspar Figueroa's confessions, and nearby is a single length of worked gold, the missing piece of the ward that caused the father of maggots to turn the conquistadors into Cariciri. While the investigators are looking for Rizzo, de Mendoza is busy making his move on Professor Sanchez, distracting Elias if he's there, and vomiting his larvae into Sanchez's mouth. He will only do this if he can get him alone. It also gives us some information on the Cariciri in their monstrous form, and the method by which they convert humans to their own kind, as well as the game mechanics to support this. Should the investigators fail to get to the Professor in time, they will find him writhing in agony, unable to say anything other than, "He kissed me." There are also traces of a white waxy substance on his mouth. At this point, Sanchez is doomed to become a Cariciri. After the attack, they may feel the need to confront Larkin at the Hotel España, but will find him in his room in a semi-conscious state following a hit of heroin. However, even in this state, he will strongly deny any involvement in de Mendoza's attack, feigning horror, and if they've managed to kill de Mendoza, he will act relieved. The investigators may imagine that Larkin is an innocent party, which is something he will play into. If they're aggressive towards him, he will take a more aggressive approach back, taking on Nyarlathotep's demeanour, although this, from the keeper's perspective, should probably be a last resort. Gunfire, fighting and the like will incur the wrath of the hotel's owner, Petronilla Cupertina. It also gives us some more pulp considerations with regard to fighting de Mendoza, though he is a tough customer. It gives us notes on continuing the expedition should various events happen before setting off, such as Larkin and de Mendoza dying and Rizzo and Sanchez living. It's also important at this point for the keeper to understand that the investigators know what to do, including what to use the golden ward for. It also gives us the handout of Figueroa's confession. After this, we're off to Puno. A small city of around 20,000 people, Puno is close to the shore of Lake Titicaca, which it gives us note on. It talks about the option of bypassing Puno altogether, and also game rules for how to handle altitude sickness. It gives us details on how the investigators can get to Puno, as well as a map that details the route they should take, and goes into the recent Cariciri actions within the city. In Puno, Jackson Elias has a contact, Naira, who is a Yatiri, a kind of healer wise woman who can assist them. She lives on one of the floating islands on the lake, and she can give them some good information on the folklore surrounding the pyramid, as well as that involving the Cariciri. Naira can help them by using her traditional healer abilities, and from this point on it is assumed that the expedition secure pack animals and supplies and start travelling towards the pyramid. It then goes on to detail the journey to the ruins that are around 70 miles from Puno. Along the way, the investigators have to contend with not only the freezing conditions in the evening, but the 3 encounters presented here. The first one is an attack by a feral Cariciri in the small hours, which could also result in the death of a pack animal. The second encounter is a farmer and his son fighting off 2 Cariciri, Julio and Domingo Cespedes. Julio managed to drive them off, but his son Domingo has had most of the body fat sucked from him. The investigators can help them should they wish to. The final encounter finds the investigators noticing 2 figures moving through the tall grasses about half a mile ahead of them. These are 2 Cariciri. If they follow them, they can find the site of the ruins before dark. The next section is the ruins themselves. Located on a plateau overlooking a deep wind-blown valley, it is a site that has sparse plant life that is accessed by climbing around the edge of a neighbouring peak and a precariously narrow path. The place is dusty and unwelcoming with lots of blowflies in the air, a sure sign of carrion. It gives us a map that details the area of the ruins as viewed from above. Once the expedition gets down to the site itself, there are plenty of things to catch their attention. The walls of the compound are crumbling and decorated with archways and carved heads with distended mouths that produce an unsettling whistling sound when the wind catches them. The grounds contain a charnel pit full of corpses of those that the Cariciri have sucked dry to feed their god. Investigating the pit finds an entrance to the tunnels below. The pyramid itself is mostly submerged in the earth with a low crack running across the top. It's only 3 inches wide, but the smell of corruption and a buzz of blowflies is overwhelming. A bubbling, oozing sound can be detected coming from within. It then moves to the tunnels that surround the underneath of the pyramid. Here, there are a few rooms that contain Karasiri and all of the loot that they have stored here that they have plundered from their victims. The culmination of this chapter is the Pool of Filth. This is the part where de Mendoza and his men originally removed the section of the gold warding. The stench of decay here is almost unbearable, and it's impossible to get to the broken section to repair it with the piece of wood that they have without wading into the pool, so creative solutions are advised here. The pool itself is of highly flammable fat, but the black smoke cloud that it could produce should be enough to discourage this course of action. Once the water is replaced, the Father of Maggots is completely contained. All of the Karasiri will wither away and die within the next few days, and de Mendoza, if still around, will appear after stalking the investigators, seeming scared and confused. In the highly unlikely event that the players manage to encounter the Father of Maggots, they find a seething, semi-liquid mass of rotten and congealed white matter. It's statted out in case the investigators follow this foolish course of action. Larkin's fate is also discussed. If he is alive and has joined the trip with them, he is keen to prevent them from thwarting his plans. This will initially take the form of preying on their greed, crouching what he says in archaeological terms. Fortunately, the ward that is still in place prevents him from entering the tunnels. Should Nyarlathotep fully possess Larkin, he can influence them directly using the mental suggestion spell on isolated investigators. The chapter concludes with the investigators hopefully succeeding in repairing the ward on the pyramid. This causes the Karasiri cult to die out almost immediately, with future generations believing that they were just a fanciful tale from folklore. If they fail to repair the ward, the cult remains and continues to spread. If Larkin and de Mendoza survive, they will monitor the investigators for a while, waiting for the time to strike should they stay in Peru. Elias writes of his experiences in the Hungry Dead and decides to investigate Larkin's background further, leading him to Meweru and the Bloody Tongue, as well as the Carlisle expedition. Over the intervening 4 years, he stays in regular contact with his new friends, suggesting he may need their help in the future, setting up the events of the rest of the campaign. Finally, it gives us some rewards for the players, which includes an investigator development phase. The chapter ends with the game stats for all of the relevant NPCs, the Karasiri and the Father of Maggots, as well as Larkin in both human and possessed by Nyarlathotep forms. Okay, that concludes Peru. The next video in this series will be Chapter 1, America.